Hey, I'm Pallace Garza. I was wanting to maybe do a quick, well, it's not going to be quick, but it's going to be a wide breadth of information for sort of some keys to basic medical astrology basics. As you know, my background is in Ayurveda. That's been cool to see sort of everything snowball into a big avalanche of symmetrical information across the different healing traditions, especially as they correlate to astrology and the elements and humors. There are some tools that I have accumulated, and I guess I would like to share those with you in this presentation. That being said, let me go ahead and start sharing this. So, yeah, so you can check out my blog, astrovedicus.wordpress.com. That's always cool. You can see some of my thoughts and musings and new sort of essays and things that I write based on books I read or conferences that I go to or new techniques that I learn or new translations that I do. I just did one for Ernst Wilhelm. He has a really good free ebook on the nakshatra that I thought was interesting and alchemical. And yeah, so that's all there. You can also email me, queerastrologyclub@gmail.com, if you have any questions. So first and foremost, I think healing is alchemical in nature. I'm an alchemist. You kind of have to become one if you're going to make powerful medicines, because there is no way to heal someone on one realm of an illness or a pathology or a disease. You have to deal with the consciousness, or rather the soul, the spirit, and the body all together as one if you really want to have lasting results. So as such in alchemy, you kind of have like this triforce, this triple header of the basic elements within a medical compound or a medical procedure. You have like the oil or the essential oil of a plant, right? That's up here. And that's going to be its essence that is otherwise unchanging or not particularly prone to transformation. But you have the spirit below it, which is Mercury, which is much more volatile, changing, and that's kind of like I guess that would be like the ferment of a medicinal remedy, right? All plants ferment down into alcohol, basically liquor or spirits, which is where we get that, kind of encapsulate that concept of this unified transformative process. It's separate from the essential oils, even though they may arise together or a similar process. Of course, you have salts and minerals and all of that within your plants as well. So that's going to be your body or the structure of the plant matter. So of course, that's just an analogy. You can apply that to psychology. You can apply that to the human body, but the salt of the body, the mercury of the body, these philosophical concepts, right? You have literal aspects of sulfur and mercury, which, as we'll find out, love each other. Mercury and sulfur are often can be found together. And salts are within the body, but they also represent sort of philosophical structures. You can see on the right I've added some sort of astrological components. Sulfur is the upper, mercury is the middle, salt is the low. Sulfur is the proton, mercury is the electron, salt is the neutron. But kind of importantly is the soul is like the cardinal aspect, the cardinal signs of the zodiac. The convertible, if you use like Jyotish. The mutable signs are that really rapidly changing and sort of like violently transformative. The bridge between the soul and the body is the spirit, and that's kind of more mutable signs. And then the fixed, of course, that leaves for the body, or the grossest, densest part of matter, or part of this process rather. They're all matter in a way. That's all represented by the fixed signs, which are kapha and water. Those are considered the heaviest elements. So as such, we attribute water and earth to the fixed, and then back up the ladder. The more changeable ones are going to be air and ether, just like the wind changes. And of course, pitta, fire and water, which has the heaviest distinction between the two elements. Fire and water are the most radically different. That convertible or that dualness is what gives the cardinal sign its nature in a lot of ways. As does the mutable, but there's a distinction there, which I won't get into in this video. Lastly, on this slide, I'm going to move forward, is in Ayurveda, we have the potency, which is hot or cold. That's going to be the soul. That's like the soul of the medicine. That's going to be its like primary classification or categorization, right? Hot or cold, red or blue, as we'll see later. Then you have I think the flavor, which is the salt in the structured, or the salt of the portion of the medicinal, is flavor, or it's, bitter, salty, sweet, sour, pungent, astringent, and those effects have a post-digestive effect, which is represented post-transformation within the intestines or the GI tract, and that's going to be your post-digestive effect here. So you have potency, hot or cold, the flavor, and then what it does after the body has digested it and is moving its way to the large intestine. Okay. So the planets are in the body. They represent different areas of the body. As such, we kind of want to, in the chart or in the birth chart or in the disease inception chart, we want to look at, or the question chart, really whatever you're doing with medical astrology, whatever branch you're going to try to work with. The sun is the life force. It's kind of it's the number one thing you kind of want to look at. I mean, that's kind of what we do anyway as a sun sign culture, right? It's your life force. It's the heart. It's the circulation. It can represent your eyes, and it's kind of like this warming effect. Ultimately, it can be kind of like your hit points, like HP in a video game. It's like your allotted overall life force. The moon represents mucosa. It's the breasts, the stomach, the brain, the eyes, and it's kind of like the protective barrier of the bodies. So anywhere there can be sort of fluid, protective fluid, even bursa, I would say, can be related to, that could be Jupiter as well, but it's kind of like a lubricating and can be insulating. It's the aquatic aspect of our bodies. In fact, humans did evolve from aquatic apes. It's time to accept that. It's time to get over it. It's time to accept it. We were aquatic apes, and the reason we have fat distribution in the body the way we do, and the way water is able to work in our bodies is evident of that. Chimpanzees don't have our fat distribution. No other primate does. We came from water. We are hairless. We are naked comparatively, right? You might have hair, but we are very aquatic in nature. So the moon is just as important for representing our life force, I think, because of its wateriness. And of course, if you're born at night, you might want to look at the moon more than during the day. We'll get into that. Mars is the blood, the febrile response. It's kind of like your warning alarm bells, right? It's your adrenal system. It's like that steroid response, that the fight or flight kind of aspect of your organism, or freeze, fight, flight, or freeze. It's important to remember that freezing is a big part of PTSD and a big part of like traumatic response. You don't always fight or flee. Most people often, I think, freeze. Mars has a lot to do with immunity. Honestly, they all probably do, because immunity is such a... I should make a presentation on immunity alone, actually. But we'll just say it's like your defense response. I think it's your non-specific immunity. Okay, so that's like your phagocytes, the primary defense to just eat everything without being a B cell or a T cell. It's kind of just like your overall defense, and they're often found in higher concentrations around portals, points of entry. Also, Mars is prostate and male reproduction. Go figure. Venus, kidneys, skin, hormones, urinary tract, the downward waters, the glow, the overall hydration of the body, and of course your kidneys, which is the watery filtration system, which is very important. Jupiter is liver, fats and oils in your adipose tissue. Saturn is teeth, tendons, bones, gallbladder, and spleen. That makes sense. It's kind of the structure of the body, kind of like the hard, mineralized bones. The gallbladder, which is like a container of acid, right? That's very Saturnian, to be so non-corrosive, to be able to hold the digestive fluids of the body. Also the spleen. Spleen could be Jupiter too. I don't know. That's what I think. Mercury, respiration, nervous system, skin. Yeah, Mercury is just omnipresent all over the body. Its function. But mostly we say it's like, the lungs, the gaseous exchange, right? We exchange money at the market, but we also exchange gases anytime there's a communication between cells. It's the nervous system, it's the skin, it's like the synaptic. It's just the communication. Everything, every time the body communicates with itself, and that's within immunity, that's within digestion. Mercury is, a lot of times I see Mercury given like a few things, but really Mercury is utterly present in the design of the body, pretty much at the moment of mitotic, right? It's the moment the mitotic daughter cells start splitting and you get differentiation. Mercury starts working on differentiating those tissues to be different organ structures. That's all a mercurial thing. And as such, genetic encoding and things like that, and all of the technology therefrom would be mercurial in nature, right? Neptune is lymphatics, the inner ocean. I don't really work with them as much. Sometimes they can be hard to predict, but Neptune, you will see lymphatic stuff. It's kind of like your inner ocean. It's also related to water, but and in that way it can be more like glandular and much more, have an effect on the boundaries of the body. What is me and what is not me, which also goes to immunity. Uranus is the nerves. It's the trauma endured and the unforeseen. I really think that, and a lot of other astrologers do, that Uranus has a lot to say about the traumas you will endure in your lifetime and how you'll handle them. So it's kind of has a more psychological bent. The zodiac can represent certain parts of the body as well. It's so funny how often this is like just like spot on. So there's two images here. I'm basically not going to go over all of them because that's a time suck, and you can just pause the video and read these. But we have kind of like an older representation, a medieval representation of, if you were to just take the circle of the zodiac and start at Aries and cut it at Aries Pisces and then hold the string up, it would be the body of the cosmic man, right? Because Aries is up here at the top, and we have Pisces down here at the feet, and they would connect if you were to put them in a circle. So everything below them kind of goes in sequential order down, right? You have Aries, head; Taurus, neck; Gemini, upper body and shoulders; Cancer is more your stomach and breasts; Leo is your heart area and your aorta and that kind of central region of the body. And you can just kind of go through and you can see the different parts of the body attributed to the zodiac. Ophiuchus, I put this in here. This image, I don't really fuck with that. I don't use that. But I think it's interesting. There's like a fetal cells, tailbone, craniosacral axis, solar sacrum, kundalini, amrit. So I, as a craniosacral massage practitioner, I do think there is this sort of hidden force that isn't represented much, and it's sort of like your craniosacral rhythms. And I do think that's something that I just haven't found an analogous placement for that in Western medical astrology, or Eastern, really. Kind of. So then, of course, you can split this into a much more specific degree. Like, this is the example. Like, there's something you can actually do where so Aries rules the head. You can divide each degree for specific regions in the head, or Taurus can be here, but like dividing the neck more specifically among degrees. So the example here, though, is Scorpio, which rules the genitals and the hidden parts of the body. You can see Scorpio degree 1 is the urethra opening, and all the way down, like you can see there's like some that are for the scrotum, some for the testes, some are for the seminal vesicles, some are for fallopian tubes. So, if you have like an issue that's hitting a strong degree, say Scorpio 9, or Scorpio 8, and you see testicular cancer arise, and it's 8 degrees, and everything's 8 across the chart, you can kind of see these signatures. So that's a very useful tool, and that's something that Cornell's work is pretty good to get. You'll see some of those in the references. The decans are, this is sort of like an Indian version, but basically each zodiac sign can be divided into 3, 10-degree sections. And these can kind of give a diagnostic clue where otherwise you might be in the dark, because the first, let's say Pisces, you'd say the first 10 degrees of Pisces are 0 being the first degree, is Pisces, right? And then you'd go to the middle part, you'd say, okay, 10 to 19 would be Pisces and Cancer, because the next water sign past Pisces is Cancer. And then the water sign after that is Scorpio. And as such, Pisces will share rulership, or share, not rulership, but share affinity, or share diagnostic hotspots with Scorpio. So you'd say, okay, well, Jupiter is the primary one to look at for the first 10 degrees, because that's Pisces. Jupiter rules Pisces in the traditional rulerships. And you see Pisces and Cancer. Well, Cancer is is ruled by the moon. So you might see the moon being more of an indicator, or having a stronger influence among these degrees than you otherwise might expect. I don't know if that makes sense. And finally, you have Mars at the end, which makes especially a lot of sense, especially as it's moving into Aries, which is the next sign after Pisces. So 4 foundational qualities. This is kind of like, a lot of this is based on Judith Hill's, who's an amazing American medical astrologer on the West Coast. A lot of her views of some of the key aspects of astrology, or the key tissue states. And we'll get into that a little bit after this, but the main ones you have to know is that as a healer, or as someone who's making medicines, or as someone who's trying to figure out what a disease does, we usually would describe things as being hot and cold, right? That's our potency, we said in the first slide. That's number 1. You have dry versus wet, also very huge. I would say that's number 2. Then you have fast and slow, and tense and relaxed, which are more an effect of the dry and wet and the hot and cold, right? So it's the quality of the hot and cold and the dry and wet and those extremes that's going to influence if the tissue is tense or relaxed, or fast or slow, based on the person's constitution. So what you have to understand is what a person's excesses are and deficiencies are in a chart, right? If I have a lot of hot, I might be more dry. If I'm very cold, I could also be dry. So it's up to you to see what the combination of the elements is. That's your job as the astrologer, as the medical astrologer, to figure that out. So certainly what's cool about astrology is you can look at the person's body and the illness to corroborate your, there's so much to see in the body that you can see where astrology is, these astrological techniques, and why they're so time tested, because you'll be amazed. Generally though, to get to the sort of what the planets, are going to do within the body, one of the slides, the earlier slides, we attributed different parts to the planets. But then what if, some are good and some are bad? That's a whole different qualitative sort of part of the planets that I kind of have to discuss, because there's benefics which are more balanced in these foundational qualities, right? They're going to be more in the middle of tense and relaxed. They're going to be warm, not hot or cold. They're going to be kind of moist, not soaking wet, right? So it's going to be a more mild, a more moderate grouping for these benefics. So you have Venus, Jupiter, and the Moon, and they really are more conducive to life, but they can bring illnesses too. Certainly if you have a liver cancer or a liver injury or scarring, you might want to look at Jupiter and see where it's at or what's going on with that. I'm not saying that benefics are only going to bring good things, but I'm just saying they tend to be more balanced. That's my point. Now, you can be sure that the more extreme malefics, Mars, Saturn, Sun, and nodes, are going to be part of an illness in some way or another. Either that they're providing the environment on the zodiac sign that is causing the illness, or being the ruler of that, or they're going to just actually physically, by their presence within a transit, be causing an illness. Saturn, of course, moves very slowly. It has a lot of time to really wreak havoc in a sign or over a person's, hot spot or key points, key degrees that affect the life force, or maybe that aspect the ascendant degree very violently. The sun is also considered a malefic because even though it's our life force, the sun is pretty antithetical to life. If we were any closer to the sun or planet Earth, there would be no us. If we were any further, there would be no us. We're really in this sweet spot within our solar system for the balance of, right? The balance of these extremities for life to occur. It's all about this balance. And these traditional malefics are not concerned with going about their agendas in our lives, be it medically or in other ways, or wherever they show up in your life, because they can be in relationships, they can be in your, career. But these are extreme energies, and they're much harder to predict. But they're mostly they're like the primary ones we want to be looking at when someone's ill. So these tissue states kind of, if we take those for that list, right, like that we looked at in the last slide, you can see that the core herbal energetic actions are to heat a tissue, to cool a tissue, to moisten a tissue, to dry a tissue, to stimulate a tissue, to relax, and to tonify. And you want to do that based on depending on how the disease is manifesting and what it's calling for. You want to, of course, administer that at specific and appropriate astrological times, which is a form of electional astrology, right? So medical astrology, you have to fuse basically all forms of astrological techniques into one to get good results. As such, that's why I consider myself someone on the medical astrological path, because it's so exciting to see these tissue states and then to be able to check the chart immediately and corroborate and immediately have results. So you can just plow through case studies and start seeing signatures. But basically the tissue states of the physio-medicalist tradition, which is kind of new to me. I'm an Ayurvedic practitioner. We have our own language for this. But I'm not going to give a free Ayurvedic, 2,000-hour Ayurvedic course to you. First of all, I don't want to teach you Sanskrit. But the main thing is we'll just use these westernized, easy to digest ones. Damp stagnation, dry atrophy, cold depression, heat excitation, wind tension, and earth flaccidity. So you can see that the kapha illnesses in Ayurveda, if we are going to do that, are going to have to do with moisture. Pitta is going to be the temperature and the digestive and the catalytical parts of the body. And then vata will be the tone and the transport, because tension just has to do with transportation and messengers, right? Yes, because the tissue, will it release fluid, will it not? Will the hormone secrete, will the hormone not secrete? Is the muscle fiber active, is the muscle fiber not active? So to physically transport the body. So vata, as such, vata is kind of number one. Your tension in a lot of ways is the first thing you want to look at for a lot of the more psychological diseases, right? The air diseases, because it can be either an excess of air or a deficiency of earth. And that's that's the hardest part of doing this, is figuring out deficiency versus excess at first. And then it becomes easier. So you need to find out what the chief, of those groupings of benefic and malefic, you need to find out on each chart which planet's going to be the best and which planet's going to be the worst for that. The easiest technique you can do is essentially sect. And this is sort of a no-brainer, right? If you're born during the day, certain planets are going to function better than others. Like the sun, for example, might do better during the day, and the moon might do better at night during her reign of the night cycle. Just as owls hunt at night and eagles hunt during the day. Every being has a time of day, a time of potency, just like in the Chinese clock during the day. And in Ayurveda, different organs are assigned different times of the day, right? So during the middle of the day, you know that your digestive organs, your fire organs, when the sun is really high in the sky, those are going to be, that's going to be the time to treat the liver. Or not, depending, but that's going to be a liver-sensitive period. And it's up to you what to do. But you need to know that The times of day, timing is everything in astrology. Go figure. That's what we're studying here, people. So you want to know right away if this person is born during the day or if they're born at night. So during the day, Sun, Jupiter, and Saturn are going to be more beneficial. Even though Saturn is a malefic, it's going to be less bad because Saturn is so cold and frigid. During the heat of maybe in a tanning or tanning outside in the sun is actually good for him. So, but Mars will be worse during the day, right? Because he's already so hot. If you were to put him in a desert, all of the heat diseases and illnesses are going to get a lot worse. And the inverse can be true. So at night you have Moon, Venus, and Mars, and they kind of do better, right? Venus does well at night, the pleasures of night. Mars does better at night because it's cooler for his hot temperament. However, Saturn, who's already cold, is poor, does not as well during the night because he's cold. So it increases his constrictive, delayed, obstructive, tense, changeable, restless type of diseases. Now, what about Mercury? Well, there's morning Mercury and there's evening star Mercury. It depends on which you can see him. If you go outside and you can see this, Mercury rising in the morning or visible in the morning, you know he's going to be on team day. If he's visible at night, he's on team night. That's a no-brainer. And that's because Mercury's, his nature, remember, is always going to be dual. You're always going to see that. It wouldn't make any sense. Astrology wouldn't make any sense without Mercurial's dual nature. Elements, we haven't even talked about really those yet. I'm going to talk about them now in a really simple way. There's the primary thing I always like to say is fire is the king of the generative cycle. The element's moving. It's the middle axis. Fire must fetch out fire, and every disease has its axis in fire. Okay, I've already said that. So, the elements start in ether. You have empty space. Particles, atoms, start moving and getting agitated in space, which creates air, gases perhaps. Then those accumulating gases can start to move or create friction, which can create thermodynamics or heat. And that heat can then liquefy or cause chemical reactions or change the state of these gases in some way or cause them to rise or fall or condense or help with that process. And that can cause water to condense out of that. And that water, of course, coalesces, condenses, crystallizes, congeals, conglomerates into Earth, which is the most structure and densest. So you have from lightest to heaviest, heaviest to lightest, and then always in the middle, no matter what quality you're thinking of. Usually fire is always in the middle. And fire has the ethereal quality of ether and air, but is visible and touchable and certainly can affect you physically in a way that the denser elements can. And certainly every disease must be treated by the nature of the fire within the body. We call that Agni, which is the god of fire, who is sort of the supreme giver of life. And really without taking an assessment of a person's digestive capacity, whether that's how they're going to the bathroom, what their digestion is, if they have indigestion, if they're in their appetite. You want to look at all of these things. If the person's not eating, not pooping, not sleeping, that person's fire is very low. So if I throw at them a bunch of healing herbs, do you think that that's going to help any? I might even have the best herbal preparation that you could possibly imagine. I might literally be Lord Dhanvantari himself emerging out of the mercurial ocean of milk, bring Amrit in my hand, and I give a drop of immortality to this person. They have no fire with which to digest this drop of immortal elixir. So ultimately, everything you do will be in service of fire. And hopefully these words will resound more and more as you go through your healing journey, your elemental journey. Even the Chinese thought you're gonna see that can be even more so with their love of the liver. The destructive capacity of fire, which they are often tonifying. That being said, I've exhausted this subject kind of for this slide. So let's talk about I'm going back. So these can fuse together to make the humors. And that's what we did, with, the Western medieval tradition. You have like bilious, or like these different sort of constitutions of a person, right? Is a person going to be more water and earth, water and fire, air and ether? But that's where you get vata, pitta, and kapha. So if you know about the doshas of Ayurveda, check them out. If you don't know, check them out. Please check them out. I'm going to make another presentation on the 15 wild beasts of the body so we can kind of see the directional aspects of the elements, because the elements are not fixed within the body. They move up and down, they change, and you need to know where the elements interact with the other elements and how they nourish the tissues in certain ways. Does that sound easy? No, it's not easy. This is thousands of hours of study. You can't just watch this video and think that you understand medical astrology. That's not reality. But this should be a start for you, and this should give you a kick in the ass to start reading some books and start taking this a little more seriously. Because it's true. Like, you have to do case studies. You have to look and see where Saturn in every person's chart, and look and see and what's being activated at certain points. That's another process. It's like that person might have all of the signatures of an illness, but it may not come about until a specific moment. And so all of these things are complex, but these are just the basics. So you have to have these basics down before you can start predicting things, before you can start compounding herbs at the right specific times for a person. Not just when it's good for an herb, but when it's good for a specific disease in a specific person. So Saturn, his more malefic qualities are cold, dry, tense, hard, and slow. That's why he gives such difficulty and such, he basically is such a bringer of death. Any chronic cold condition or limiting of the life force is Saturn. He can give heat conditions, though, by basically storing toxins in the blood. Strong Saturnian psychological things are the inability to let go. So you'll hold on to toxins. You won't really want to get rid of the wastes in your body. You'll be more shrewd with how the body eliminates, which can cause a lot of diseases. Saturn hates being in water signs because of this putrefaction. So basically, Saturn gives us diseases that require sort of a responsibility to stay alive. And that's what a chronic illness is. When you're chronically ill, your life changes a lot in that way, because there's a newfound responsibility. Everything you knew before is now different. That can be very Saturnian. And a lot of times the changes and the diseases Saturn brings are permanent. Listen to this. That's how you know Saturn is working in your life, because it's like, oh, I got eaten, my arm was attacked by a shark. Now I have this deformity. Okay, it might have been a martial thing that happened, it was an accident, but you have to look at Saturn for these permanent changes as well, and see what the strength of the person or the endurance of the body will be as well. Because Saturn does give you diseases, but he gives you endurance from those diseases and to survive from those diseases. All right, what am I saying here? So essentially, Saturn is really great for draining like wet conditions and astringing tissues, or edema or things like that. Saturn is absolutely great in some respects for giving strength to the body, like tonifying and like stretching something really tight to give strength and add that added tension. But then you can snap beyond that, and then the guitar string breaks, right? So tension is about moderation more than any other planet. I think Saturn is someone you really want to start working with if your diseases are chronic. Asking for guidance or asking for elimination or petitioning him in some way that you can work with surviving. So obviously there's a psychological aspect to Saturn because of this chronicity. Will I ever survive? Will I heal? Will I ever be the same? I can't go back to the way I was. I'm depressed. What's the point in even getting better? If you're having questions like this, like if it's testing your will to live, yeah, you might have a Saturn problem because you're feeling like it can't be escaped at this moment, or no solutions seem available to you at this moment. Of course, is that true? Are there no solutions? Maybe not at this time, maybe how you feel. But nevertheless, there will be a physio-psychological, that mind-body connection, right? If you're depressed mentally, you're going to have depressed digestion, you're going to have depressed blood flow, maybe hypothermia, depressed body temperature even. You won't even want to support the life force with your daily routine either. Your routine will kind of fall apart. A routine is absolutely necessary when treating Saturn illnesses. You have to have a morning, an afternoon, and a night routine for someone who's chronically ill with an illness that is like really sucking their life force out of them. You can't leave these people to their own devices if they don't understand the nature of Saturn, the nature of their illness. You have to give them structure. You have to give them structure. You have to give them structure. Mars, on the other hand, fast, dry, hot, tense, liquid. These illnesses, you don't see them coming. They're out of nowhere, like vomiting. Like basically every illness you see in, what was that hospital show? Grey's Anatomy, is it? Every illness was martial in this way, where the person, no matter what happened, they ejected blood out of an orifice in their face. And I mean, just across the room. Every illness had to have a martial quality in that show because it's so dramatic, right? And so good for TV. It's so ER. It's so George Clooney. Mars is George Clooney. So the catalyst of the body is Mars. It destroys red blood cells to make them anew in the spleen. So oftentimes breaking down your cells and recycling them is more important than taking in nutrition and how you break down and digest food, which Mars also oversees those acidic components in the body, right? That was destructive, separating all the nutrients within the food and the chyle and distributing them, Mercury, and getting them to different tissues. So Mercury transports, but Mars is in charge of that, that initial breakdown. It's the alarm system of the body. We talked about that. It's the warning bell of danger in a chemical structure. Mars will often rule bitter things because the bitter is the alarm bell in plants. That's like the alkaloid chemicals. It's every substance that makes you hallucinate is bitter. Everything that's pretty much a neurotoxin is pretty, well, not always, actually that's not true. But oftentimes the thing will be bitter if it's a toxin or is not conducive to life. Not always. Again, bitter things are very healing. But it can make, Mars makes very visible diseases, that are hot in nature and red and fiery. You can see it, like fevers, for example. Mars can cause cold illnesses, you can be sure, by either ejecting the heat up and out or by directing the heat in different places. And again, Mars does not like being in water signs. Neither malefics do, because the life force can be boiled off. So usually Mars is treated with painkillers because the pain can be intolerable or acute. And you will be motivated not by chronicity of an illness, but utter all-encompassing pain. So the North Node and the South Node are a little bit more mysterious, and this probably takes this would take 5 hours probably if I was going to be, real about it. The North Node and the South Node are the ecliptic points. I have a whole video on the shadows at Queer Astrology Club YouTube channel. You need to check that out if you don't understand the nodes, the basics. Wait, hold on, what just happened? Ooh. Sorry guys, I had to get a beer. This is depressing. It's like Saturn and Capricorn on my sun, my natal sun. Saturday in the hour of Saturn. I was like, why am I making this presentation right now? I'm fucking depressed. Anyway, point is, where was I? Jesus. The nodes, right? Can't live with them, can't live without them. Basically, these are the nodes, means les nodes, en français, on dit les nodes. C'est the knots of the body. It's the knots of the body. Basically, the places where energy and karma gets concentrated. I call them the portals, these sort of like spiritual portals. Basically, these reveal genetic or karmic illnesses, otherwise difficult to explain. It's kind of where you have an excess based on a psychological obsession. That's your North Node, that's your dragon's head. And then this is all in that video. But the dragon's tail is, of course, your deficiency or whatever the energy is going to be dissolved or eroded slowly, where your life force is kind of going down the proverbial drain. That drain at the bottom usually regurgitates and recycles back up towards the North Node. And that's what gives the North Node such a fiery, obsession. So basically the houses in 6, 8, or 12, or with the ascendant, or when you're born on an eclipse, you're going to have that life of that native, the chart native, is going to be peculiar in some way. You can be damn sure that they will get an illness that will be based on the effect of cumulative karmic action. I mean, I know that's definitely the cause of some of my illnesses. I mean, it's only taken me like 7 years of therapy to figure out what happened back there. You know what I mean? It's there was before the start of my illness, and then there's everything that's happened after that. And it's been a complete just unfolding of so much trauma. And at a certain point, it's just like you start to realize, you know, that the south node in your chart is oftentimes a very spiritual place, because it's a thing that you're gonna have to. It's both your central core of your spiritual being, you know, tetherment to this earth, attachment to this earth, and it's also going to be, you know, the plug that is pulled when your life force gets out. Sorry about that analogy. But yeah, north node is like mouth. It's also going to be your father's genes. The south node is going to be the anus, and it's going to be your mother's genes, and it's kind of where you're more apathetic. When you don't take your medicine, when you don't do this, when you don't do these things, when you don't bother to la la la, that's all very south node. Sounds very Saturnian, but south node has a different quality to it. Saturn can be motivated by obligation. South node is just really done with this world. It's where you're just really done in a very big way. Don't do surgeries on eclipses. Don't be stupid. Don't be stupid. Don't do surgeries on eclipses. That soul of the body is just so much more agitated and ready to jump through the portals and through the gates. Do not do surgeries on eclipses or full moons, and don't do them on new moons either. Don't do extreme things on extreme times. Don't do extreme things at extreme times. And that goes for pretty much any planet you're working with. So, okay, since the sun is considered the general atmakaraka of the planet, the life force, and after the bureaucrat, or the bureaucrat of the life force, the transit sun's relation to your natal sun. So where the sun is in transit based on where you were born, you know, if it's right on top of where I was born, that's called a birthday, because the sun comes back. And then halfway for my birthday, quarter for my birthday, 75% to my birthday, depending on where it is, will reveal basic life force quality. So the sun at halfway to my birthday is going to show more visible problems like low energy, low will, poor testament it's a poor testament of health. There can be an adjustment that needs to be made in some way, or a decision rather. When the sun can't see itself, you know, it's in a version or in a house of, in a quincunx, in other words, 6th, 8th from, or honestly 12th or 2nd. Don't release the person from care, and just, the illness may not be in its peak period. It may be, this is where like a bridge period. So the response to medicines at this time can be less effective, and the diagnosis might be ongoing. The diagnosis might be ongoing or evolving. You might not have all the pieces yet. If the sun is in aversion to itself, it cannot see itself. You may not know everything about the disease. That, or there's some obstruction to getting all the information. If the sun's squaring itself, there's hidden problems, or the problems arise upon treatment. When you start treating it, you might have a healing response cycle, like rebooting the immune system after it's been shut off. You might go into an immune crisis. There might be difficulty in adherence to a regimen, a resentment to the caregiver. There might be a denial of disease, or there might be just raw pain with no immediate, like, you know, solution. And it's just the primary agony of the disease is being experienced. The sun trining itself is more healing. It's got a more ease of care. It's got a more passivity, receptivity. You'll need lower doses of medicine. There'll be faster results, but also faster death if the life force is on the way out. Sun trining itself, that's a killer. I mean, I swear, you think that's why astrology is about, you can't just say it's one thing, honey. You got to look at the cases. You have to look. Pull up the disease chart, pull up the death chart, and put the pieces together. If you see when the life force goes out, when that snapshot, the sun is trining it, oftentimes there's open cooperation with spiritual forces. And even if the person was getting better, they may suddenly just go. But most likely it's a healing thing, most generally. A sextile to itself, it's a weaker positive thing, but you might find hidden help or hidden administrative assistance, successful treatments. This all applies to surgeries too. This is a lot of Judith Hill's work. She's amazing. Check out her website. She's based in Oregon somewhere. So the Chara Atmakaraka is an Indian thing, and this is the governor or speaker of the solar life force within the body. So all the energy we were talking about as sun being the primary Atmakaraka, right? He's immediately going to be your life force HP, but everyone has their own custom sort of like enactor of that life force. And so it's going to be the very heavily involved in the death chart, and also will act as sort of like a guide of the spirit into the next realms. Like, what will be your spirit guide's quality, or as a psychopomp? No, that's a fun word. Mercury as a psychopomp. But basically, how do I find out the Chara Atmakaraka? There's one for each position of the 7 traditional planets. So the most advanced planet by degree will be the life force. You know, the middle one will be the wife, and then the last one will be, or is it the last one that's wife? Maybe it's the last one. I can't remember right now. I'm totally blanking. But that's neither here nor there for now. We just want to know Atmakaraka, the Chara Atmakaraka, the specific one, the custom one. So mine, for example, would be, you know, the sun, because it's at 21 degrees Capricorn. So that means, you know, my Atmakaraka is, the sun is for both my personal and my overall general life force indicator. Oftentimes, you know, it's not the case. You'll see, like, you know, Mercury being actually the one that will give testimony to a lot more of the qualities of the life force. Resilience, right? It's also your resilience, and your endurance can be in there as well. This is a no-brainer. The moon phase is critical for herb administration. When it's waxing, you want to increase that tissue or that physiological or psychological effect. If you want more of something, use the waxing moon. No-brainer. If it's waning, you want to decrease that tissue or the physiological effect or the psychological effect. If I want less of that thing, I'm going to use the waning moon. So here's a no-brainer as well. This whole slide is just a no-brainer. Whatever sign the moon is in, that part of the body will experience fluid sensitivity. And so fluids are how we give medicine, and you're going to want to treat that part of the body, but you may want to be careful when you're cutting on it with iron. Does that make sense? So let's use an example. If the moon is in Aries, I may not want to do brain surgery. I may not want to cut the head because, you know, the moon is the brain, and then it's in Aries, which is a highly inflammatory, like hot, disaster-prone kind of Lord Mars, all of those qualities. And of course, because of that added sensitivity, I'm not saying you shouldn't do the surgery. I'm just saying you may not want to do it when the moon is in Aries, because you're more likely to see a lot of problems. There's going to be more pain. You're going to need more narcotics. You're going to need more problems. However, for herbal stuff, if you're not cutting it, that might be better, because it's going to be more sensitive, as in the herbs will go there. The blood will go to that part of the body, and you'll be able to distribute the pharmacological or, you know, effects a bit more available readily. You know, you might want to give herbs for a headache or an eye strain. That was the example. So another example is like, moon is in Gemini or Aquarius. You don't want to give an intravenous needle, and you don't want, it'll be just too hard to find the vein. You're going to cause a lot of poking. Even if the nurse is good, she's going to have a really hard time finding the vein. But that might be a good time to do something for treating growing pains in the native, or treating lung issues, or yeah, something with the respiration, or maybe something with the arms. That might be a good time to treat illnesses of the arm bones, some kind of shit. Pulling stuff out of a cast, liberating one from a cast. But in surgery, the balsamic moon phase, which is 45 to 90 degrees behind the sun, is the best for low blood loss and for surgeries, because it's a time for healing and regeneration, and generally it's going to be a much more successful surgery in the balsamic moon phase. So these are the phases here. This chart's kind of a lot. But here we have new moon, and then the correlating moon phase. These pictures will relate to these up top. So you'll see that the moon starts in front of the sun and you don't see her. And then she starts kind of moving away from the sun. We start seeing a sliver of her light. That's going to be the waxing crescent, or the, and about at an angle from that position when she was hiding herself, she's at the first quarter. She's going to wax and wax and wax. So she gets full moon. She's behind the earth, receiving full light from the sun. And we, as such, see the brightest part of her face most visibly. Then, of course, there's going to be so much bleeding at that time. And there's going to be so much bleeding, a lot more sensitivity and pain at the new moon. So, of course, because her light is so big, there's going to be the fluids of the body are going to be more agitated or more readily transported and moved. And, this could be a good time to start a fast at the full moon, because then you want to start decreasing something. It's also, a good time to end a fast, maybe on a new moon, or vice versa. It depends on what you want. In Ayurveda, we treat things based on moon phase almost primarily, especially when we're doing like Panchakarma, Purva Karma, Pashat Karma, and all the rasayan, the rejuvenative, process of post cleanse, right? So cleansing and things like that, you really want to use the moon. So when a moon is with the planet, treat it to defeat it. When the moon is with the planet, treat it to defeat it. This is more potent than planetary hours. I use planetary hours though I just noticed some little, to start out, don't use planetary hours, but because it's kind of, you'll start to feel like you're going insane because you're checking out, they're constantly shifting every 2 hours or something, and you're constantly changing rulership of the hour, and it kind of made me paranoid for 3 months. But basically, when a moon conjoins a particular planet, treat the conditions associated with the nature of that planet. So in this way, the treatment will be expedited and potentiated. So an example would be when the moon joins Saturn and Capricorn. Oh, poor moon, right? That's kind of sad. Actually, that's really sad for her. She doesn't like being so cold. But you might want to give castor oil, a pungent warming oil, and with a heat compress on an osteoarthritic part of the knees. So what do we have here? We have the pungent warming thing to combat the cold moon and being on cold Saturn and cold Capricorn, yin Capricorn. And then the knees are ruled, Capricorn rules the knees, and Saturn is kind of chronic cold conditions like osteoarthritis. So basically your moon sign in a lot of ways is going to be more important than the moon phase. So back before we had moon phase, where is she at in her transition of light, but then the moon sign is going to be a lot, it's going to be a lot of that too. If not more so. So the diagnostic answers, I went back to the phases here because it's so important in some ways in terms of Solve and Bishop, which is a sort of like an electional technique, or not electional, but in terms of questions and finding out how the disease is going to go. You want to use the anchor points of first quarter, full, third quarter, and new moon to kind of see what's going on. So, if something's beginning in a waning phase, when the moon is getting less sunlight, usually the pathogen won't be as strong because the environment will not allow the pathogen to have a grip on the body. The fever will be easier to manage and faster to dissolve. But if the moon is getting bigger in light, the opposite's going to be true, right? Because you're going to have a lot more of an appropriate tissue environment for pathogen development, most likely. It'll be more serious, and it's going to be a lot slower to resolve. That being said, you want to look and see, if there's like a benefic at these critical junctures where the moon crosses a benefic or a malefic, that is going to decide where that phase of the illness, if it's going to be good or bad. If you've got a benefic right up, if it starts in a new moon and you have Saturn at the full, well, the worst of it may not be here yet. In fact, it may go very, very, very poorly, indeed. But if it's mostly benefics on those anchor points of that I've sort of put a red hexagon around, if there's benefics in those zones where the moon is, you might have more luck, or might have the illness resolve at those junctures, or have a release from pain. And I've basically said everything already, but that's represented here. The 7th day, the 14th day, and the 21. And here we have the alchemical significations of the powers of 7. So, 7th day after a disease will be a quarter, 14, 21. Not that they're all going to start on the new moon, but I'm just saying those are going to be critical days. This is a form of prashna, or question asking, that we use in Jyotish. So in the spagyric method, there's also 7, a procedure of 7, which is interesting. You have calcination, dissolution, separation, conjunction, fermentation, distillation, and coagulation. So, ideally you would take the fermented material at the 5th step, and you would use heat to distill it up into a gas, a gaseous state, a vapor state, and then sort of have it as it cools in this sort of like coagulation tube, it will cool in its true essence, its volatile oils, or its spirit rather, will be sort of condensed. Or its oils. Its oils too will be separated out, right? So the whole process separates everything. But yeah, fermentation, distillation, and coagulation are kind of represented by this distillation process. And that's the spagyric method of medicine making. First you want to burn the material of plants, dissolve them in the appropriate, herbal remedies or tinctures, or kashaya if you use Ayurvedic medicine, which is all part of Vaishajya Kalpana, which is its own medicine making. Ayurveda has its own beautiful spagyric method as well for making these asavam and the arishtam, which are fermented, very powerful fermented medicines that are extremely quick acting and extremely useful for long-standing illnesses. But that being said, the procedure of 7 is just perpetually useful in a psychological aspect as well, right? I'm not just talking about what you can do to herbs and making medicine. There's a psychological process of calcination. There's a psychological process of being immersed in the feminine and the mysteries of the intuitive body, the ocean of overwhelming emotions, and the separation and being able to discern between what is mine, what is not mine. The conjunction of now trying to align those forces in yourself and realign yourself to your true nature, and then seeing that there's this, when you do that, that there's this vibration that arises inside you as things might begin to fall away or ferment or purify in some way. Because fermentation is a sort of purification, because all plant matter becomes alcohol, and that alcohol is said to be the spirit, the mercury, the philosophical mercury. That's the mercury stage of the psychological development. And then you have to distill that, which is the lunar phase, before you can coagulate that all into your new personality, which is your heightened personality, which is your egoless state or your samadhi state, or whatever, shunya, or there's so many words to describe this golden state of transmuting the consciousness from the process of calcination to coagulation. I'm going to make a presentation on the magical metals, and we're going to talk about that in the very first 10 minutes. So if you're interested, eventually I'll put a link in the comment or the description that will take you to that video, and you can kind of get the more psychological aspect of healing, because I can't really go into that here. We're already so many slides in, and you guys are already so bored. So the planetary procedures of 7, we're just going to go for it, drawing down the powers of the moon. So the Chaldean order of the planets is the planetary sequence based on relative orbital speed from a geocentric position. So what does that mean? So that means how fast does a planet go? Well, if you're doing magical petition making, or if you want to make medicines, you generally can use a septogram or a procedure of 7, starting from the moon or Saturn, depending on if you want to draw something down towards you or push it away from you. If you want an illness or disease to move away from you, or like a concept or psychological thing to a spirit to be purified or alleviated, you might start from the moon and draw a glyph or a talisman, starting from the moon, moving to Mercury, right? So this one would be like a generative cycle, but you could also do a degenerative one when you want to break something up. So there's so many ways you can combine these, but you have to know the Chaldean order of the planets because it's utterly important for every magical tradition I've ever studied in my life cross-culturally. And if you don't understand the Chaldean order of the planets, you kind of won't understand astrology as it has made its way through antiquity and moves through, as it's been, it's a very consistent theme, even though it's been persecuted and regurgitated and hidden and classified or recategorized. The Chaldean order is like the hermetic backbone of all types of religious tradition, Jewish, Muslim, just Christian, anything, Buddhists, everything. It's all here. Procedures of 7. We see 7 and 7 again and time again. And alchemy, we see the number 3 all the time. 7 times 3 is 21, which is isn't that how many there are in the major arcana of tarot, or was it 22? Maybe if you don't count the Fool. But so this procedure of 7 has to happen thrice usually. So I always recommend repeating spells at least 3 times on good electional charts, right? If I'm trying to do these procedures, the planetary procedures, I want to make sure the moon first and foremost is in a good phase and a good sign and a good position relative for the task I'm trying to do. Because it moves so quickly, you can probably afford to wait to do the spell when it's in a better sign. However, with the other planets, you might not get so lucky. You might need to draw down, starting from Saturn, when Saturn's well, that's actually not bad, but for some things, but when Saturn's in a more difficult position, like let's say fucking Pisces or some shit. Also looking at doctor versus patient, if there's a long-standing relationship between a caregiver and a patient, you want to look and compare those charts. So generally, if the doctor's Mercury or Mars is in conjunction or squaring the nodes, you're going to have a problem just overall in a surgical concept. But generally, the doctors, they should just do a synastry chart and see what you see, like between the planets, the benefic and the malefic planets, right? Specifically, the doctor's Mercury and because that's going to be his diagnostic capacity in a lot of respects. And pull up the chart for the moment you're going to go meet with him, because you might want to look at Mercury to see how strong he is on that day and see if that doctor will be all the additional, because it's not just the doctor, right? It's not just his brain talking to your brain. There's nurses, administration, there's forms, there's instruments, there's things that can go wrong. So much can go wrong within a consult, and you kind of should, you can pull up the chart for the day of that meeting if it's significant, let's say before a surgery. You want to generally Venus, Jupiter, Mercury in relationship by trine or sextile, because sextiles and trines are considered more favorable aspects, the more easygoing. But if you see those benefics in both of the people's charts, this patient and doctor, and they're in a good relationship, you might have really amazing results even when otherwise there shouldn't be even. But yeah, Mars will cause malpractice in a surgery if that Mars is on the patient's nodes, because there's going to be a karmic thing where the doctor actually in a past life, karmically he can't heal the patient, or he's going to harm the patient, no matter what he does. Even if he's trying to save the life, he'll end up killing him. Sensory energetics. I save this one for last for some reason. I don't really know why. I think it's because it's weird to put it here, but I think it's important to talk about in terms of rasa. We have sweet, sour, salty, bitter, pungent, and astringent, but the elements will affect kind of the tissue state, right? And the elements can join together to make different flavors. Sweet is water and earth. That's why babies like sweet things. It's the most dense, it's tissue building, it's slow, wet, and cold. You can trust sweet things. It's probably going to be good to eat unless it's antifreeze. But sour things are earth and fire, right? Because you have that kind of destructive sour vinegar penetrating, slicing fire with the earth element of this like fermented kind of vinegary pungentness. Sour things are really good for increasing the heat of the body and the wetness of the body, for lubricating. Like when you eat something sour, your mouth gets really wet and starts salivating. And if you need a tissue to get wetter, you might want to use sour things or sweet things. However, sweet things are cold. So if something's dry and cold, you might want to be careful how much sweet you use. But generally, sweet is the safest. Salty things are fire and water, right? That's going to be the most it's like dried ocean water. So traditionally, so fast, wet, and hot, that's going to increase those qualities in the body because it's got the fieriness, this this heat to it. Overly salty things cause diarrhea and blood pressure issues and can affect how, the pressures within the body. So be looking to the salt content for blood issues or tension issues. Bitter things are air and ether, so that's going to slow the body down. It's going to dry it out and cool it off. So bitter things are great for fevers. They cool you. They slow something that's they can slow diarrhea. They can dry what was otherwise too wet or swelling. Right. Pungent things are fire and air. That makes sense. Those two elements coming together makes a pungent mess. It's fast, it's dry, and it's hot. That's great for removing constipation or getting an herb to work faster in the body, right? It has immediacy to it. It's drying though. So if there's a too wet condition or a stagnant condition, pungent can be great. Pungent is great topically, think for pain and stuff, by bringing blood up to the surface or bringing white blood cells or activating the immune system. Activating, not aggravating. Remember that. Pungent herbs go from activating to aggravating very quickly. Astringent things are air and earth, which are completely opposite. Air erodes earth. But that slows the body down, that dries the body down, that cools the body down. Whereas pungent speeds up, astringent things slow down. And remember, pungent and astringent aren't really flavors. You wouldn't say, oh, this orange is like pungent or astringent in the sense of how it tastes. They're more effects in the mouth. Does that make sense? So I ate a spicy thing but it's a sensation. You're not actually tasting it. It's just a potency. And astringent, pungent has to do with potency, and astringent has to do with moisture, right? Astringent isn't really flavor. It's the lack of moisture, the moisture being taken away from the body. It's stripping of oils or something like that. That sensation. Colors are very useful in healing. Gemstones are part of that, if you know anything about that. Saturn is typically violet. Mercury is green. Jupiter is blue. Actually, Saturn is like deep, 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 deep blue. And kind of borderline violet, but not really violet. More like deep, deep blue. Venus is indigo. Moon is orange. Sun is bright red. Mars is yellow. And the imperceptible colors are the north node, which is ultraviolet radiation, and infrared radiation is the south node, kind of below and above, right? The below and the above aspect is alchemical. The vertical plane in the alchemical thought is definitely represented by the north node and the south node, that which ascends or transcends, and the ascendant, the divine, that is reaching for us down below on earth. Because the heavens are reaching for us just as we reach for them. And as such, the nodes kind of represent things that are beyond the scales of perception. So as such, that makes perfect sense then that ultraviolet and infrared radiation go there. So the gems we want to use for Saturn are sapphire. You don't want to use sapphire because that's going to increase the amount of Saturn in your body if you have a Saturn condition. So you have to remember, if I'm wearing this color of gemstone, which is already expensive, you need to choose the metal correctly. You need to wear it on the right finger for the right planet. And you need to know if you actually even need that gemstone. Don't just try things and invest in things because you might do a lot of harm, right? All of my planets are in Capricorn. My Saturn is in Aquarius. I don't think I need to wear a sapphire ring. Do you? No, I sure as fuck don't. I am fine. I am an embodiment of Saturn. I am the Saturn talisman. What I would probably do well with is something for my debilitated Jupiter that gets me into a lot of trouble. I do great when I wear topaz or citrine or kind of orange and this kind of thing. When I work with spells in Jupiter and Pisces, these are always really effective for benefiting me. I don't need more Capricorn and Aquarius in my life. These are the references. You're going to want to check out Judith Hill, Medical Astrology, A Guide to Planetary Pathology. That was one of the first books I ever read on the subject. Western version of things, and she just makes things really lovely and concise. Also, go hear her talks. She's amazing in person. Benjamin Dykes. That person is a powerhouse translator of Arabic and what is it, ancient Greek, Latin. I don't even know what. He probably translates. He'll be into Mandarin by the end of the, by the end of the year. Who knows how much cocaine he's doing. But yeah, Dimitra George did Hellenistic Astrology Volume 1. Also, he doesn't do cocaine. I don't know why I said that. I'm a Sagittarius rising. Dimitra George, Hellenistic, she's going to come up with a volume 2 of that. I'm looking forward to that book as well. You definitely want to find that book and get it. What an amazingly approachable work for such a dense subject. Saja Popam did Plants and Planets, Philosophy of Medical Astrology. Dennis William Hauck, Howard Leslie Cornell, classic doctor of medical astrology. He has a huge textbook on the subject of that MRI scan. If you really want to know the specific degrees and what it's related to, I would get that book if you can find it. And then, of course, Vasant Lad, who's an Ayurvedic teacher in the West, or here in America. I think he has the New Mexico School of Ayurveda thing. I don't know. He has textbooks that have amazing images and visual aids for you fire signs who need that visual learning. Please get those books. They are so helpful. That will inform you so much on medical astrology just by trying to understand how the elements work in the body. Thank you so much for checking out this presentation and the keys to medical astrology. I hope you'll check out my further videos on things like the metals, the magic, and working with the metals in an alchemical sense, and looking for future videos on Ayurveda and, of course, traditional astrology. So thank you so much. Namaste.